The storm had been moving fast out of the west, rolling over the plains like a dark thought Ethan Cole couldn't shake. He just finished tying the barn doors when he saw her, standing near the fence line, soaked, shaking, a thin shawl clutched around her shoulders like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked young, but her eyes were old. Ethan didn't ask questions. He never did when someone looked that close to breaking. "Come inside," he said, holding the lantern higher so she could see his face. "Storm'll turn mean in a minute." She hesitated, like people do when kindness feels unfamiliar. Then thunder cracked, close enough to rattle the ground, and she nodded. Inside the house, Clara set a blanket around the girl's shoulders and poured warm broth without a word. The girl held the cup with both hands, staring into it as if it might disappear. "I'm Clara," she said gently. "This is Ethan." The girl swallowed. I won't be trouble." "You already aren't," Ethan replied. "Sit." She ate slowly, carefully, like someone used to counting bites. When she finished, Clara showed her the small spare room, the one that always seemed to be waiting for someone. "You can stay as long as you need," Clara said. That was when the girl finally looked up. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "I'm not sure I'm safe." Ethan paused in the doorway. "From the storm." She shook her head. "From my past." They didn't push. They never did. Days passed. The girl, she said her name was Mara, helped with small things, feeding chickens, folding laundry, sitting quietly at the table while Clara read in the evenings. She slept lightly, woke at every sound, but she smiled more with each sunrise. Still, Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled whenever a rider passed on the road, the way she avoided mirrors, the way she flinched at raised voices, even laughter. One night after supper, she asked to speak with him alone. They sat on the porch, the prairie stretching wide and dark beyond the lantern light. Crickets sang. The air smelled of rain and dust. "There's something I should tell you," Mara said. Ethan nodded. "All right." She twisted her fingers together. "The reason I ran, the reason I'm afraid someone might come looking." He waited. She took a breath, steadying herself. Then she whispered the name. "Jonah Cole." The world went quiet. Ethan felt it like a blow to the chest. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 20 years, not since the trial, not since the funeral, not since the town had decided to forget. "My brother," he said slowly. Mara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't know, not at first, I swear. I only learned your name after I saw the gate, the carving. I should have left." Ethan stood abruptly, packing the length of the porch. Jonah, his younger brother, the charming one, the one who smiled easily and hurt people quietly, the one Ethan had testified against when no one else would. "He's dead," Ethan said, "died in prison." "I know," Mara whispered, "but what he did to me didn't die with him." Silence stretched between them. "I was 16, she continued. "He promised work, said he knew a rancher who paid fair. I trusted him." Ethan's hands clenched. "He said if I ever told, no one would believe me, that he'd already ruined better women than me." Ethan stopped packing. "I believe you," he said. She looked up sharply. You do." "I testified against my own blood," he said quietly, "because truth matters more than names." Mara broke then, sobbing into her hands. Clara came to the porch, understanding everything without a word, and wrapped her arms around the girl. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. Memories came back sharp and unforgiving, missed signs, dismissed rumors, the weight of guilt he'd carried like a second spine. He thought the story was over, that justice, however imperfect, had closed the door. It hadn't. In the days that followed, word spread. Someone recognized Mara in town. Whispers stirred. Old loyalties tested themselves against old truths. Some folks stopped coming by. Others showed up with food. The sheriff came once, asked questions, left quietly. Ethan stood firm through it all. She stays, he told anyone who asked. End of discussion. One evening, Mara found him repairing the fence Jonah had once broken as a boy. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. Ethan didn't look up, "Because I didn't do enough before." She nodded, accepting that. Seasons turned. Mara healed slowly, learned to ride, learned to laugh again, learned that her name didn't have to be spoken in a whisper. One spring morning, as apple blossoms fell like snow, she stood beside Clara and said, "I think I'd like to stay, if that's still allowed." Clara smiled. It always was. Ethan watched them from the porch, the weight on his chest finally easing, not because the past was forgiven, but because it had been faced. Some names are curses. Others become lessons. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is open their door. Even when the truth that walks and shakes everything they thought they'd buried. The trouble didn't arrive loudly. It came the way it always does, through small, careless mouths and long memories that refused to stay buried. Mara noticed it first in town. A woman she'd spoken to twice stopped returning her greeting. A man she didn't know stared too long, then muttered something under his breath. By the time she reached the dry goods store, her hands were shaking. She didn't tell Ethan, not that day. But Ethan had lived long enough to recognize the shift in the air. He saw it in the way people looked past him instead of at him, in the way conversations paused when he entered a room. That evening the sheriff came again. "I won't make trouble," the man said, hat in his hands, "but folks are uneasy." "About a girl who survived?" Ethan asked. "About Jonah," the sheriff corrected quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then they should have been uneasy 20 years ago. The sheriff nodded. Some of them were afraid. After he left, Mara stood in the doorway, having heard enough. "I can go," she said. "I don't want to cost you this place, this town." Ethan turned to her, eyes steady but tired. "You don't fix rot by covering it up," he said. "You cut it out." Clara took Mara's hands. "Leaving doesn't heal shame," she said. "Speaking does." The town meeting was called 3 days later. The hall was full, too full. Faces Ethan knew, faces he didn't want to know. The mayor cleared his throat, nervous. "This is about peace," he began. Ethan stood before he could be stopped. "No," he said, "it's about truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Mara sat stiffly beside Clara, heart hammering. She hadn't planned to speak. She hadn't wanted to. But when someone said Jonah's name with nostalgia in their voice, called him misunderstood, something inside her snapped. She stood. "My name is Mara," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "and Jonah Cole hurt me." The room froze. She told them everything, not with drama, not with anger, with facts, with dates, with scars she didn't lift her dress to show because she didn't have to anymore. Some people cried. Some stared at the floor. A few walked out. When she finished, the silence felt heavier than shouting. An old man finally spoke. "Why come here?" Mara looked at Ethan. "Because this is where the truth lives," she said, "and I was tired of running from it." Ethan stepped forward. "My brother was not a good man," he said. "Loving him didn't change that. Protecting him would have made me complicit. I chose otherwise, and I'd do it again." The meeting ended without applause. But it ended. The days after were quieter, painfully so. Some doors stayed closed, others opened wider than before. A woman left bread on Clara's step without a note. A young boy tipped his hat to Mara like she belonged. Healing, Ethan knew, wasn't loud. One morning, Mara found a small wooden sign leaning against the barn. Ethan had carved it himself. Mary's place. All who enter do so with respect. She traced the letters with her fingers, tears blurring her vision. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "That's why it matters." That summer, Mara planted a garden. Tomatoes, beans, wildflowers near the fence line. Life pushing up from soil that had been turned over, exposed, and finally allowed to breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat beside Ethan on the porch. "I used to think my story started with what he did," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No, that's where it tried to end." She smiled then, really smiled. And the town, slow and stubborn as the land itself, began to change. Not because it was forced to, but because someone finally stood still long enough for the truth to catch up. Autumn came softly, like an apology. The fields turned gold, and the air carried that clean, sharp smell that only comes after truth has been spoken and nothing is left to hide. Mara worked the garden until the last tomatoes were picked, then helped Clara dry herbs by the kitchen window. Ordinary days, once unimaginable, settled around her like a steady breath. But healing has a way of inviting memory. One afternoon, a rider approached the ranch alone. Ethan saw him from the fence line and felt the old instinct rise, the one that never quite leaves a man who has already buried too much. The rider dismounted slowly, hands visible. "I won't step closer unless you ask," he said. Ethan studied him. "Say your business." "My name's Thomas Reed," the man replied. "I knew Jonah." Mara, carrying a basket of apples, stopped short when she heard the name. Thomas removed his hat. "I was wrong about him," he said, "and I was quiet when I shouldn't have been." Silence stretched. "I heard what happened at the town meeting," Thomas continued. "He did something to my cousin too. She never spoke. I thought maybe if I had." His voice broke. Ethan gestured toward the porch. "Come sit." Mara didn't leave. She stayed where she was, heart pounding but grounded. Thomas spoke carefully. Not excuses, confessions. How Jonah had been charming, how warnings had been laughed off, how silence had been easier than confrontation. "I came to tell her I'm sorry," he said, looking at Mara, "and to tell you I'll say it out loud now, to anyone who asks." Mara met his eyes. "That matters," she said, "more than you know." After he left, Ethan leaned against the porch post, exhausted. "They'll keep coming," he said, "people carrying pieces they didn't want to hold." Mara nodded. "I think I'm ready." Winter arrived early that year. Snow covered the ranch in quiet layers, smoothing the edges of everything. Even the past felt farther away under all that white. On Christmas Eve, Clara placed an extra candle in the window as she always did. Mara noticed. "For travelers," Clara said, "for anyone who needs to know there's light somewhere." That night, as the fire crackled, Mara handed Ethan a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I made it," she said. Inside was a scarf, thick, uneven, clearly made by hands still learning. Ethan swallowed hard. "No one made me something since my mother," he said. Mara smiled. "Then it's about time." Spring came again, as it always does. This time Mara didn't feel like she was waiting for it. She walked the land like it knew her name. She laughed easily. She slept without waking to imagined footsteps. One evening, she stood at the fence line where she'd first been found. "I used to think being taken in meant being small," she said, "like I owed something." Ethan joined her. "You don't owe safety," he said. "It's supposed to be given." She nodded, eyes shining. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan looked across the ranch. At the house, the fields, the place that had learned how to hold pain without breaking. "Now," he said, "you live." And for the first time, that felt like more than survival. It felt like a future.